I will review the content from this lecture and the last lecture. So this lecture and the last one, we have been concerned with two ways of defending direct reference theory, which is the view that sentences and beliefs have as their content or meaning simply Russellian propositions which are made up of reference. And as many cases show, as a kind of Frege puzzle cases show, Russellian propositions cannot explain cognitive value. So therefore, the ways of defending direct reference theory that we've looked at are two different ways of finding something other than meaning or content that can explain cognitive value. So to review the Frege held that the meaning of an expression both determines its referent and plays a cognitive role. So the meaning of certain names with the same referent have to include more than just that referent, because sentences containing them may have different cognitive roles. In the past two lectures, we have looked at two ways to save the view that meaning just is reference by finding something other than meaning to explain cognitive value. Now, here is a very quick summary of Fodor's view. Fodor's picture is that individuals might not be aware that two of their beliefs are about the same object because those beliefs involve different names for that object. So the sentences that our mental states involve as tokening, according to Fodor's language of thought hypothesis, may have as their meaning simply Russellian propositions. Here's a few questions or problems to start thinking about when working through this view. This solution, so Fodor's solution, makes sense of Frege puzzles in our thought, so for instance, different beliefs. But one might ask, how does it respond to the original Frege puzzles that are directly about the meaning and cognitive value of sentences themselves? So that's one thing to think about. Furthermore, as I noted in the last lecture, it's not clear that the kind of opacity that the language of thought provides, in fact, lines up with the kind of opacity that Frege's puzzle requires. So Kripke's case of Paderewski, so this is a case that Kripke gives in his lecture, in his paper, A Puzzle About Belief, on page 265. Kripke gives a case that seems to pose a problem for the language of thought. Solution to Frege's puzzle. So there's certain cases that you can reflect on and wonder about how it is that the language of thought proposal is supposed to make sense of them. Now, here's a very quick summary of Perry's proposal. Perry proposes that the general linguistic meaning, which isn't sense, but the general linguistic role that context-sensitive word types have, explains their cognitive values, while sentence tokens containing these expressions simply mean Russellian propositions. So for Perry, the relevant kinds of meaning are simply the token meaning of an expression, which is just its referent. So token sentences have simply express Russellian propositions, which are composed simply of reference. But then word types, so context-sensitive word types, also have general linguistic roles attached to them. So for example, the word today has a general role of picking out the day on which the word today is uttered. Or the word type I has a general rule of picking out the speaker who utters it. And these general linguistic rules are not senses because they do not determine reference, okay? But these general linguistic rules are what, according to Perry, explain the cognitive values of tokens of these expressions. So some problems for Perry's proposal, or questions one might ask in thinking about the proposal, are as follows. how does this proposal deal with Frege puzzles that arise for non-context sensitive expressions? And furthermore, there are certain cases that seem to pose a problem for Perry. So a slight modification of his own enterprise case, which is on page 483 of his paper, where the same demonstrative that is used multiple times, seems to be a kind of Frege puzzle that poses a problem for Perry's proposed solution. So the reason I'm mentioning these sets of problems is that one of the long essay topic will be involved thinking about Fodor and or Perry's solutions to Frege's puzzle in defense of direct reference theory and of critically engaging with it. So here are some places to start looking at issues to engage with for critically evaluating Fodor and Perry's proposals for saving direct reference theory.